Hi, Brandon. How are you?
I'm good. It's very nice to meet
Yes.
you. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I've had like just the right amount of coffee, so I don't have like the jitters, but I'm actually functional. And you're like, wait, you're ending your day, right?
I just fed the kids, so it's 6 p.m. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so just easing into that evening vibe where are you LA? You starting your day?
Yeah. So I just dropped the kids off at school. So we've just both finished Total Chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's high five ourselves for just getting, we
yeah,
did
I'll
it.
take it. I'll take it. So
Um, Listen, great to chat to you. Thanks so much for your time. I had the absolute pleasure of chatting to Tony Gilroy actually a couple of weeks ago. So your ears must have been burning, because he
yeah. Well,
was.
let's hope our stories align. So
I've made notes. Uh,
Okay, good, good, good. You let me know. It's like, no, 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 that did not happen. So,
but he was full of such high praise, for you coming in for the second season of Andor, and just really so much to kind of play with this show, with characters, with relationships, with settings, with history, with the future. It's kind of just, I mean, is it a lovely opportunity to have that, to bring your creativity on board to something like this, or is there an element of, as well as that, it's slightly daunting, or all of it?
it's completely both. So, I I was so nervous at the beginning because there's so much weight on the music of Star Wars, obviously, going all the way back to like basically to the original.
Yeah,
But then on top of it, you have all these modern day titans. Like you have Nicholas Bertel on one side, and then on the other side, you run right into
Michael
Michael
Giacchino. Yeah,
Giacchino.
yeah.
So it's like a Brandon sandwich in between those two guys. So it was a little bit intimidating,
You're a great
but
filling.
yeah, a great feeling. I guess you could. Yeah, okay, yeah, if you want to
Yeah,
silver lining it, yeah, we'll
yeah. There
call
you
it
go.
that.
Yeah.
But um, and then I got to see like all 12 episodes the night before, well, 2 days before I met Tony for the first time on like a Zoom.
Hmm.
And so I think he could see in my face I was like a white sheet. And then he was just very coddled me in the right way. And he said, "Hey, I know what it's like to come into a gig in the middle of a gig where everything else is a smooth running machine. But I've listened to your stuff. You're going to be great. And let's do this." And I think that was kind of the right thing to hear at the right time. And
Yeah.
so from that point on, just kind of put all the fear to the side and kind of the legacy aspect of it all. And you just say, okay, what does each scene need? And then you just do the work. It's all just about eventually just getting the work done.
Yeah. It's a random question, but did you, or were you even interested about what, if there was any specific projects of yours that he had really kind of been impressed by, or anything specific, or was it kind of, your work overall that he was like, he's the guy for me?
I think so. I was recommended by John Finkley, who's the music editor and who on season 1 and 2 of Andor, and he's works with Nicholas Bertel a lot, and he had recommended me to Tony, and unless I'm mistaken, I think he played him some of the additional music I'd written on Logan,
Yeah.
and ironically, not big set pieces. It was actually dialogue sequences, um, and so Tony obviously writes big, beautiful monologues, right? So he's very sensitive to how music sits under certain things, and I think that might have sold him. At least that's what I understand, um, but I wasn't 100% privy to what sold him.
That's so interesting because, that Logan was such a unique and beautiful and brilliant entity in that world of superhero movies and, that kind of thing. And James did something so different with that as well. But the music for that is an extraordinary reason, I think, why that film resonated so much. And those characters we got to the real heart of those characters and the real kind of machinations of their, of kind of the turmoil, I guess, that we're going through, sort of thing as well. Was that a kind of memorable experience for you working on that film then?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, credit where credit's due. That's Marco Beltrami and Bud
Yes.
Sanders. That's like their thing, and I was just along for the ride. Um, but I think we all knew at the time we were doing something, working on something special.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, it's it's funny because I think the same. We were talking about this the other day, a couple of us. The same vibe is with Andor, where I think everyone when they're on a project gives 100% at this level,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But I also think you can tell when you're on something that's special, and it just has a different vibe to it. And in both cases, I think Logan and Andor, there was kind of that feeling
Yeah.
with everybody, VFX, production, actors, everybody.
So you get sent the 12 episodes. You've had
Yeah,
that
have a minor heart
conversation,
attack. Yeah.
had a chat with Tony. He's put you at ease. Where do you
Yeah.
start? Do you have a, do you have an instrument that's your kind of your go-to or what is the starting point, or is it different for every project?
Well, in this case, it's a bit messy, right? Because Nicholas Bertel he'd written a little bit on season two,
Yeah.
before he had to depart, but it wasn't in order. So he had jumped in on 204 and then had gotten through like some of 205. So episode 5, season 2.
Yeah.
So one of the first tasks was jump in this mid-season sequence with this big heist and then make it work and don't screw it up. So that was task one. So I figured, and so what it is it's jumping back and forth between a bunch of source music, and a big gala on Coruscant, and then a
Yeah.
heist happening on Gorman, and it was so complicated, and that became my like December. So I started working on that, and then sent it to Tony, John Finkley and John Gilroy, the picture editor,
Mm.
and I mean that was the longest 24 hours of my life waiting to
Oh.
see what no, but then I get this Zoom, and Tony's very to the point.
Yeah.
He's and so I get this, and he starts by just shake on the Zoom. He's like shakes his head. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is great. This is great.
Woo.
So I was like, okay, we're cooking with gas. So I think starting there put everybody at ease, because a
Yeah.
lot of people took obviously a risk having me on the show, and uh, and so I think that put everybody, including my mind, at ease. Like, okay, this is going to work.
Yeah.
You never quite know until you write that first piece, like how it's going to land.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, and then it was, yeah, then it was, we hit our stride, so it was great.
Yeah. It's so rich though, because you mentioned those kind of two events going on, but within those events there is so much like intricate detail going on, whether it's a character, whether it's the kind of a relationship within that, within that kind of event that's going on as well, and the movements of those things. It's I'm so interested to kind of what the journey the music has, or the job the music has in taking us on those journeys through those pieces, and when we maybe move from one character to another, it's almost like a companion in a way, isn't it?
Yes, yes, and I think it's important to make, and this is only, I'm sure every film composer has a different opinion or a different way of describing it. For me, I think of it as you need to make a concerted decision on what you're scoring. So in any particular scene, are you actually scoring the action on screen? Are you scoring the emotional undertone of what's happening?
Yeah,
Are you scoring subtext that isn't even on screen, right? Or are you trying to set up a different emotion? And so I
yeah,
think Andor's an example of where you sometimes aren't scoring what's literally on screen. And then you're scoring the underlying emotion, and that can even carry over to action scenes. So you might be seeing a big set piece, but what's actually important is the loss, or the loss of innocence of the galaxy in certain cases. And so um, I try to, and a lot of times that's communicated by Tony or whatever director you're working with. But it's generally kind of an ongoing discussion on like, hey, maybe the scene is about this.
Yeah.
And yeah, and what I found is when you make a decision like that, sometimes it's wrong, but most likely your instincts are right, and score that. And it has much more intention that way, and it tends to land harder.
Were there characters that were easier to score than others? Or relate or
Um,
yeah.
I have no idea why, but um, I find like all of the Deidre stuff just so fun to score. I mean, she's
Yes.
yeah, and Cyril, her and Cyril's relationship has just the right amount of messed up, weird dynamics. Like it lends itself to some quirkiness. It lends itself to some dark stuff. I'm certain they have some weird stuff going on behind closed doors. Like
Oh yeah.
I'm quite certain it's all there. So I found those really fun. But
Yeah, it's a bit sex lies and videotape, isn't it, going on there for sure.
totally.
It's like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure there's a spin-off late at night spin-off series waiting to happen.
So here, this
So
is really funny you say that because I had such a lovely chat with, it was supposed to be with Kyle, Denise, and Ben all together. But
yeah.
Kyle was poorly that day, so it was just Ben and Denise, and they were wonderful. And we were just talking about, how important having tangible things are for them, the sets being kind of the intricate
Yeah.
detail of the set and how it really allows them to inhabit and be and play kind of thing in those characters. And Denise told me that the props or the set guys, the designers, had gone like they were obviously not messing with her, but kind of like having a bit of fun, and that they'd gone so far as she said they had special things in her bedside drawers.
I believe it. I believe it. Yeah. Yeah. We need you to completely inhabit the character, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so great. How much were you thinking about, this is such a unique thing where we know the end, we know with Rogue One, we know kind of where this season ends up. Or these characters, not all of them, but a lot of them end up. How do you think about that, in terms of there's an end point to this? And that in itself's got a framework. You mentioned Michael Giacchino and working with Gareth on that wonderful film, but or do you not kind of take that on board at all?
No, no, and it's a good question. There was a lot of discussion about this, but the biggest discussion had to do with palette. So so if you so Nick Britell's palette from season one obviously uses a lot of synths and electronics mixed with orchestra. But then
Yeah,
if you look at Giacchino's palette for Rogue One, it's way more akin to John Williams' palette, which
yeah,
made sense. So it could segue right in, right?
yeah,
So so the discussion was how and when do we do the handoff to becoming more orchestral?
yeah.
And at first, and the funny thing was John Finkley was like, he's like, guys, this has to be on the radar. He's like, I cannot tell you how important this is. And we're like, yeah, we agree. We're just not quite sure where to do it. And what we found was we kept pushing it farther and farther back. So we
Hmm.
said, okay, well, maybe we'll do it after the first 6 blocks and it'll start to become more orchestral. And that's not to say there wasn't, orchestral sessions obviously the entire time, but start stripping out the synths is basically the vibe. And then we said, well, no, we need eight, nine need it. And then, oh wait, 10 needs it. And then 11 really needs it. And so what we found was it was the second half, it was really episode 12 where we started stripping it out, and it all felt right and it didn't feel too jarring. So when you
Yeah,
get to that last half of 212, the final episode, that was where we really started stripping out synths. We really started stripping out electronics, and hopefully the sleight of hand is seamless. But it was also a learning thing for me too. Is wow, you don't really have to do it midway. You do it when it feels right. And there's
yeah.
sometimes no logic to that. It's just based on instinct. And we all kind of landed in the same spot on it. Um, but but yeah, it, going back to your question, it was on everyone's mind. How do we make this feel like a seamless thing, a
Yeah,
seamless
yeah,
transition?
yeah. And there's some really kind of interesting like diegetic music within the show as well. You know, you've got the wedding,
Hmm.
and I'm not sure kind of, in terms of I joked with Tony in terms of like a whole new meaning to like a glitter ball, which I just thought was
Yeah,
so clever. It was just like,
yeah.
oh, I want one of them. But what was the kind of conversation around that? Because that's quite an interesting, if you think back to the original Star Wars, we obviously got the cantina. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of there's not apart from that really. There's not any other diegetic music in as far as my brain can remember in Star Wars, and so this was
No, no,
quite.
no.
Go on.
I'm gonna, so we don't get obliterated.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it's there's actually quite a bit. It's just never, it's not as overt as maybe the
Okay.
Cantina Band. But
Okay.
we did have Jabba's Palace back in the day. It was now we're in my
Yes.
childhood.
Yes. Of
I'm
course.
gonna,
Yeah.
yeah. We had
Yeah.
we had
With
Jabba's
with
Palace.
the dance and the kind of with the
Yeah,
yeah
but I'm going original. I'm going pre special edition.
yeah.
I'm not going Jedi Rocks. I'm going
Okay.
like the original. And then we did have like
The
the Ewok scene
Ewoks.
at the
Yeah.
end, right?
Yeah. See, now
And
I'm
then
thinking about it. It's like, yeah.
but I think to your point, the ones that stick out are the ones when they're really highlighted. And obviously the Chandrilian wedding is a massive highlight point, and then the heist is a massive highlight point where you're literally you're going back and forth between on-screen diegetic and score, and then the two have to transition ideally seamlessly.
Yeah.
And it was such an integral part of the edit, like
Hmm.
how the even the edit was supposed to work. Um, that yeah, I mean but I do think this season in particular has an insane amount of diegetic music. And like even in um like even going back to Yavin, right? So we there was discussions about like, okay, all of the guys working to build Yavin, the rebel base.
Yeah.
Like, what are they gonna do at night? Well, they're probably gonna like break out some hubcaps and whatever whatever junk is lying around the construction site and basically create a drum circle. So we had background stuff like that. We did stuff with like dulcimer and cymbalum for Gorman. So there's
Yeah.
like it's a little bit more posh, and so we assume there's a band out there in the like maybe a three piece out there in the quad,
Yeah.
or by the terraces, like
Yeah.
basically playing.
In the
Um,
coffee shop, in the kind of coffee shop vibe as well.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So we even named the band like the fake band Cough House, and so yeah, so Cough House the band, and we had this ongoing joke that they basically tour the galaxy, and so they got maybe a gig at like their big gig for that year was maybe playing like something in Coruscant. We had backstories for like guest artists that showed up for Cough House. It got ridiculous, but the end result
Wow.
was a ton of diegetic music in a lot of styles, which drew from a lot of the arsenal, the tool arsenal. So I was happy. If I was in my 20s, it would have been a lot harder to pull this off just because I didn't have the experience.
That's am that's amazing. I remember when I interviewed Garth for Rogue One, and I was just, did you get to like dive into the kind of, I don't know, the hard drive of Star Wars for like, and
Yeah,
he's like, yeah, he's like, he said I spent about a week just listening to things like, the kind of the sound of the Death Star being kind of sort of thing, and he
right. The
was sort of
handle. Yeah,
yeah, and so it was so you could see his little. It was like chatting to a 5-year-old because his little face lit up, and he was just like, and then I listened to this, and I listened to that, and it's just that kind of idea that you get the opportunity to inhabit this world and have all these kind of toys that you can play with or pull from, or in this case, this is pre it all, in terms of that kind of so much of it anyway that we know. So it's kind of, did you do any of that of kind of diving into that kind of archive of sounds and talk about instrumentation there as well.
instrumentation too. I mean, like I know like I know the original trilogy score so well. I mean it's in my DNA at this point. And Empire Strikes Back's like my favorite score of all time. So I think for me, I can dork out over lightsaber sounds and this and that, but for me it was always the music.
Mm.
So like one of my happiest moments was I heard my son run through the room singing part of the Battle of Hoth. You know, the like the tuba part. I was like, oh yeah, well, it's like I guess you get a toy. I can't believe it. So
It
so
worked.
it worked. It worked. Yeah. Although playing that iPhone by my wife's pregnant stomach works. So I I for me it's I think there's always two parts happening. You have your here's your day job working on the music and the scene. But then
Yeah.
there's also this kind of fan dream come true aspect to the whole thing that you have to keep in check because that's the part that can quickly make feel too overwhelming.
Yeah.
Um, but there is that part where, like for example, in episode one, I got to score a TIE fighter chase. You don't get more 6 year old boy coming out in, and so I was like, okay, well, I clearly am not going to be able to write the asteroid field from Empire. So I try to do my own thing with that, but you can't. It's such a kind of a landmark
Mm.
moment in your life because Star Wars was such a huge part of my youth. I mean, I still have. I mean, don't tell anyone, but I still have like all my old toys, and like my kids play with my old toys. It's crazy. So yeah,
So lovely, so lovely. I had so I watched all 12 episodes before I went and chatted to Tony and some of the cast and stuff, and they were really surprised that I'd watched all 12 episodes. I'm like, are you kidding? It's like you can't. It's like, of course I did.
yeah.
And it's so funny. I had a friend who is watching it now go out live, when they're dropping, I think 3 episodes at a time every week. And he's just experienced fashion designer Cassian, and he's just like, "Oh, I like this phase," and it's kind of
Hmm.
like that was quite. I thought that was a really kind of fun element within the show because it kind of it does give you those moments of respite almost in a way. Do you know what I mean? Of kind of like you just kind of you can kind of take a breath, or there's something kind of really funny going on, or there's something that just for that moment sort of thing as well. And the music's got to complement that as well, or not if the choice to not have music. But there is so much music,
Yeah.
in this show. That must be an interesting thing to navigate as well, tonally.
Yes. I think we took some risks slash liberties this season that even I asked. Like a good example is before Edie comes over for dinner
Mm.
and Cyril and Deidre are like setting up the apartment. We went kind of like smooth jazz, almost music. And the question was, like I asked is like, is this going like tonally, are we jumping the shark here? Like
Yeah.
and we all talked about it and we all I mean, I used for justification, I used like John Williams, like when Anakin was gonna kiss Padme, he had this and they stopped, he has the string go so he full on leaned into the comedy of the moment. And so I
Yeah.
was like, no, let's do this. And then they were down too. And then when you watch it play down, it's fun. And I think Andor's such a heavy show that
Yeah.
I'm like you, I like these moments of levity because I don't think they come often.
Mm.
When they happen, they're wonderful. And obviously we've humanized the characters through all the drama, but there's these little moments that are almost comical that I think we could lean into musically.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there was a few moments where I was like, yeah, all right, let's try it. Let's see if it works. We'll have some music in Star Wars. And we even have a Good Morning Coruscant jingle. Like, like it's like the so we have like Good Morning America show here. Well, they almost have like,
Oh
Good
yeah,
Morning
there's that the
Coruscant.
Ruby
So
Wax thing.
there's a jingle for that, and then there's also a Gorman tourism reel to reel music that almost sounds like the old 1950s films you would see, newsreels you'd see at a movie theater before, or at a movie before the main thing would play. So yeah, there's a lot,
Yeah.
and a lot of different styles. Yeah,
I mean, just talking to you, it's kind of like, that's a lot of work. There's a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. It was a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm not just writing a score for the show. It's like all these other little bits, but there are, there it's the attention to detail, it's the attention to storytelling, to
Yeah.
world building, to it's extraordinary.
But I think too that like goes for every department. They're all doing that. Like
Mm.
Tony told me some story about um I think it was on like the production designer. He saw something on the table that looked too terrestrial, like too Earth is terrestrial, right? And he's like, no, and changed it all out, and he's like, it's too recognizable. But when you
Hmm.
think about that, that extends to like wall plugs or screws, like
Hmm.
those have to be changed. And so I think, like you said, it's all in service of the world building and the immersion. And
Yeah,
so the music has its task too, but sometimes that's a massive chunk of the work as you go, okay, the score is done. You're like, oh man, I haven't even touched the diegetic stuff yet. So
yeah. What made you want to become a composer?
I mean, I always loved film music. I mean, going back to Empire Strikes Back, and then I don't know how to, I don't know if this is good to say or not, but like my first cassette tape was Karate Kid 2.
Great.
So I guess I started with Bill Conti, and then my first CD was the soundtrack to Cocktail with Tom Cruise. So I'm not saying these are like high watermarks, but these were definitely, it was always kind of in my DNA.
Hmm.
But originally in college I was like a jazz guitarist. So I grew up in Monterey where like Monterey Jazz Festival is a huge thing, and I was in the jazz ensemble and everything. But I had this epiphany one night playing jazz guitar at a coffee shop when I was in college. Kind of, I would have like a gig,
Yeah.
and I there was no money in the tip jar, and there's just a joint, and that was the moment I was like, I don't know if this is sustainable. So
Or
and so
healthy.
yeah, or healthy. So not shortly after that, I was like, okay, I want to see if about this film composing thing, and then I just never looked back. I got into the program. Everyone was better than me, and then but that turned out to be the best thing ever because the you learn so much from your peers. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that
That's
was kind
so
of how I got into it.
That's so interesting because I had the joy of chatting to Erwin Winkler recently around Alto Nights. And so I was like, I can't have you here not talk about some of the amazing work you've done with, as a producer with composers. And Bill Conti was one on Rocky.
Yeah,
And he said, I mean, you probably know this, but he said that they found him playing guitar, I think, in like a restaurant in Italy. Someone, and it was
really.
like, yeah, and it's like, what? It's just like,
Oh, I didn't know
yeah,
that.
and I was like, wow, that's, I'll send
Yeah,
Ray the link so you can hear him talk about it. It's really fascinating. But it's like it's these the way that kind of it was just so fascinating. Then you think of these kind of, if that person hadn't seen him play at that moment, then what would Rocky have sounded like? It's kind of,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, fate in the world. I love it. Um, do you have a wish list of, like, you've worked across so many really, really, really different projects, which is so great because um, I think that's the great thing about composing is that you get the chance to work on lots of different types of music, types of storytelling through your music. Whereas you're in a band, you kind of do a slightly different version of what you've done before in a way, but
Yeah, yeah.
composing gives you this sort of landscape that's vast. Are there certain types of films that you're really keen to sort of work on, or filmmakers that you really want to work with?
Yeah. So ironically, someone was saying the other day, like, oh, you're basically a horror composer. I'm like, I don't, I guess I never, I guess you could look at it. I look at a lot of the stuff I've done and say I've done a lot of horror, but I don't feel that way at all. Like I feel like I love my parts in um, melodic and and thematic music.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't, but then at the same time, I think things like horror are enable a massive amount of creative freedom. Like people
Yeah.
are, they're down for anything, any cool ideas. So I, in all honesty, I'm down for anything. Um, but I will say this: okay, I heard online. I saw that there was like some sort of rumor that there might be like a Star Wars horror film, and that I don't know if this is true. All I know is that when I saw that, I was like, ooh, because that would if that is true. I mean, like the internet is literally Star Wars rumor mill central. But if that's true, I was like, oh wow, that would be so fun to kind of merge those two genres. And I think it would lend itself really well, but it would kind of pull from all my, let's say, all
Yeah.
my experience. So that I would love to do. And then I'm also a sucker for westerns. Like
Oh, yeah.
I love westerns. So I mean, I can't. I mean, yeah. I mean, I could watch Sergio Leone films all day long. So
Yeah. I think the last Western, kind of contemporary wise, was probably Hateful Eight that I thought was great. Was with
yeah,
him.
I agree. And
Yeah.
What Marco and Buck did on 310 to Yuma, I thought was awesome too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, it's so lovely to chat to you and also just to kind of your enthusiasm is so infectious and just that kind of notion that as a little boy playing with his Star Wars toys to now be talking about being part of creating music for the world is just so great.
Yeah,
So
well,
great. Yeah.
have a lot of people to thank for it. I mean, like you go back to the luck thing and being in the right place at the right time and having some people take some big chances on me. I'm the grateful composer because I've had great mentors, great projects. I'm a lucky dude.
Well, you've done a phenomenal job on this series. You really, really have. It's such, that what we love about making the show is that it just allows us to celebrate how important the music is to our experience as fans, when we sit down and watch it. And yeah, you've done a lot of brilliant work in this show, Brandon. So congratulations.
Thank you. That means a lot, and I really appreciate it.